Welcome to Lens of History. This channel exists for one reason: the stories that didn't survive, the people who were never meant to be remembered and who deserve to be. If that's the kind of history you're here for, subscribe. You're in the right place. And leave a comment. Tell me where in the world you're watching from. I read every one. Shelby County, Tennessee, November 1868. The man they were looking for was not hard to find. This was the thing about men who believed themselves untouchable. They stopped hiding. They ate at the same table every Sunday, attended the same church every week, rode the same road home every Friday evening at the same hour, because nothing in their experience had ever suggested that the road home was a place where consequences waited. They were the consequences. They were the thing that waited on roads for other people. His name was Warren Cole. He was 41 years old, ran a general store 12 miles south of Memphis, attended church on Sundays, and sat in the third pew from the front. Shook hands after the service with the specific warmth of a man who understood that warmth was a form of currency. He had left Mississippi 2 years ago without explaining why to anyone who asked. And no one who knew him here knew there was anything to explain. He had become, in the estimation of everyone around him, a respectable member of the community. He was good at starting over because he had never once been required to account for what he was starting over from. On the last Friday of November, 1868, Warren Cole climbed into his buggy at the usual hour and drove south from the county seat on the road he had driven every Friday for 2 years. He did not arrive at his destination. He was found the following morning in the ditch beside the road, 3 miles from where he had been going. The Shelby County Sheriff examined the scene. No wound, no sign of struggle. The horse standing calmly in harness nearby, as if it had simply stopped and waited for someone to come and explain what had happened. A man, dead, on a road, with nothing to show for how he got that way. The sheriff wrote 2 sentences in the county record. He closed the file. What the sheriff did not know, what no one in Shelby County knew, what no record anywhere would ever show, was that this had happened before. 3 times in this county. 4 more times in 3 other counties. 7 deaths across 14 months. Spread carefully enough across geography and time that no one with authority over any single file had reason to connect them to each other or to anything else. What the sheriff did not know was about the Brotherhood. What he did not know was about the night in 1866 that had made the Brotherhood necessary. What he did not know was about Isaiah. Marshall County, Mississippi, September 1866. The night came without warning. This was how it always came, not like a storm, which announced itself through pressure and the behavior of birds and gave you time to brace. It came the way certain things come when they have decided that warning serves no purpose. All at once, out of a clear sky, with the particular organized violence of people who have planned it carefully and are not afraid of what they are doing because they have never been given a reason to be afraid. Isaiah heard the horses first. He was 31 years old, sitting on the step of his cabin in the early evening. The cabin that was technically his now, in the arrangement that had replaced the previous arrangement without changing most of the practical details. He was listening to the sound of his daughter inside. The formless, tuneless singing of a 6-year-old who sings because the inside of her body is too full, and the singing is the only available exit for what's in there. He heard the horses. He heard, a moment later, the torches. He stood. He understood, in the instantaneous way, that people understand things they have been dreading for a long time, exactly what was coming down the road toward the settlement. He had 3 seconds. He used all of them. He went through the cabin door and picked up his daughter in one motion. She was 6 years old, weighed almost nothing, stopped her singing and started to ask a question. And he went out the back and into the sorghum field, and he ran. He ran with his daughter pressed against his chest and her face turned into his shoulder because he did not want her to see what was behind them. She was somehow silent. The specific, terrible silence of a child who has understood from the urgency of the arms holding her that sound is not safe right now. He ran until the sorghum field ended and the tree line began. He stopped at the tree line and turned. The settlement was burning. Not one cabin, all of them. The 7 cabins of the community that had been forming here since emancipation, that had been trying to become something out of the rubble of the previous arrangement. Burning simultaneously, the way things burn when someone has planned it and started each fire at the same moment so that nothing could be saved by running from one to another. He could hear voices. Men's voices, high with a specific excitement that was worse than anger, because anger had a limit, and this did not sound like it had a limit. He could hear other sounds that he would spend the rest of his life trying not to hear. He stood at the tree line with his daughter's face against his shoulder. His wife's name was Clara. He did not see her again. He had seen 4 faces in the torchlight before he ran. 3 seconds. He used them well. He would remember those 4 faces for the rest of his life, with the specific, total recall of a man who has understood that forgetting is not available to him. He walked north for 4 days. At night. Hidden during the days, the particular economy of motion of someone making themselves hard to find, the relationship with shadow and tree line that had lived in his muscles through years without being needed and was needed now. His daughter's name was Mercy. She was 6 years old. She did not speak for the first 2 days. She ate what he found, berries, creek water, the edge of an abandoned garden, without complaint, with the quiet, adaptive acceptance of a child who has understood that the rules have changed and is waiting to learn the new ones. On the 3rd morning, walking through the pine country at dawn, she spoke. "Where are we going?" "North." "Where is Mama?" He looked at the road ahead, the tree line, the distance to the next cover. "She's not coming with us," he said. Mercy looked at him for a long moment, not grief yet. Grief would come later when she understood what not coming meant. But the expression of a child deciding whether to accept an answer she senses she should not press. She nodded. She looked forward. She walked. He watched her walk, this small person, 6 years old, moving through the Mississippi pine country with her arms at her sides and her chin level, and he felt something that had no clean name. Something that lived in the same territory as grief, but was different from it. Colder. Something that did not move, but accumulated. The way a stone accumulates heat, silently, without visible process, until it is too hot to touch. He picked her up and carried her. He thought about the 4 faces. He was not the only one walking north. He found the first of them on the 4th day, a man named Elias, sitting at the edge of a creek with his boots off and his feet in the water, and the expression of someone whose body has decided to stop before his mind gave the instruction. Elias was 28 years old. He had been a carpenter. He had a scar along his left jaw from a tool accident at 14, and the hands of a man who had spent his adult life building things. Broad, calloused, capable. He had come from DeSoto County, and he had come with nothing because nothing was what the night had left. Isaiah sat down beside him. The creek moved. Neither of them spoke. "How many?" Isaiah said finally. 6. The flat, careful voice of a man who has learned to say certain things without feeling, because feeling makes the saying impossible, and the saying has to happen regardless. "The whole North Quarter." After midnight. Did you see faces? 3 clearly. I saw 4. They sat with that for a moment. The water moved around Elias's feet. A bird called once and fell silent. Where are you going? Said Elias. North. Memphis, maybe. And then? Isaiah looked at the creek. I don't know yet, he said. Which was true. He knew what he was carrying. The 4 faces, the burning, the cold accumulating thing that had replaced everything else. But not yet what shape it would take. Only that it would take a shape. Accumulated things found their form. Come with me, said Isaiah. Why? 2 people is safer than 1. Elias put his boots back on. They found Marcus 2 days later, a blacksmith from Tate County, 35, broad-shouldered, still, with the specific impression of a man who has packed something very large into a very small space inside himself, where it exerts constant pressure but shows on the surface as nothing. He had lost a brother and a brother's wife and their 3 children. The kind of arithmetic that didn't resolve into grief because grief had a shape, and this didn't have one yet. He looked at Isaiah and Elias for a long moment. You're both running, he said. Walking, said Isaiah. North. Running? From or toward? I haven't decided yet. Marcus picked up his bundle and fell into step. He did not speak again for 2 days. Tobias they found in Holly Springs, 32, had lost a wife and 2 sons, carried it in the specific economy of his body, the way a man carries something he has decided never to put down. Cyrus was 26, from Benton County, the youngest. With the expression of someone for whom everyone he'd lost was a fact he was still in the process of making real. He was quiet the way attentive people are quiet, taking in more than he put out. Ruth was last. She was 40 years old, had worked as a midwife on 4 properties in 2 counties for 20 years, and she moved through the world with the authority of someone whose work had always been too important to be stopped. She had stood in her cabin doorway on the night of her burning and memorized every face she could see by torchlight before she ran. With the precise, clinical attention of a woman who had spent 30 years noticing what other people missed. She had memorized 11 faces. She told Isaiah about them on their second evening together, sitting by a small fire at the edge of a clearing, her voice steady and her descriptions exact. Height, weight, the details that were distinctive, the broken nose on one, the lazy left eye on another, the way a third man held his mouth when he wasn't speaking, as if perpetually on the verge of saying something he had decided against. Isaiah listened to all 11. He recognized 2 from his own night. He looked at the 6 people around that fire. He understood, in the way a building is present in an architect's mind before the first stone is laid, complete and inevitable, requiring only time and work. What was going to happen next? I know where 3 of them are, he said. No one asked what he meant by them. Tell us, said Marcus. Isaiah told them. They reached Memphis in October 1866. They found work, the exhausting, poorly paid, show-up-everyday work available to 7 black people in Memphis that year. They showed up every day without complaint. Reliability was the cover. The work was the visible thing. 7 people who had come north after the disruptions and were making their way quietly. Nobody looked closely. This was what Isaiah had understood before any of the others. The specific invisibility available to people doing exactly what the world expected of them. The invisibility of people the world had already decided not to look at. He had lived inside it his entire life. He understood how complete it was. He understood that complete invisibility, in the right hands, was a form of power. They were not interesting. That was the point. What they were doing in the hours that weren't work was visible to no one. They met on Sunday evenings in the back room of Ada's laundry on Beale Street. Ada was a woman of 50 who had her own reasons for providing the space and asking no questions. The room was small, warm, smelling of lye soap and wet cloth. Every Sunday, the 7 of them sat together in that room and built what they were building. The first Sunday was the hardest. Not because the plan was wrong, the plan was right. Isaiah had known that since the fire on the road north. It was hard because it was the first time all 7 of them were in the same room, in the light, without movement and urgency. The stillness made it real in a different way. 7 people each carrying something alone, now carrying it together, in a space that smelled of laundry soap on a Sunday evening in Memphis. Ruth spoke first. "I need to say something before we talk about what we're going to do." Everyone looked at her. "I know why we're here. I understand what Isaiah is proposing, and I think he's right." She paused. "But I want us to be honest with each other in this room about what this is. Not for anyone outside. For ourselves." "Say it," said Isaiah. "What we're planning is not justice. Justice would be a trial, evidence, a verdict, someone with authority over the outcome." She looked around the room. "We don't have that. We will never have that. What we're planning is something else." "Revenge," said Marcus. "Yes." The word sat in the room. "I'm not saying that's wrong," said Ruth. "I'm saying it's what it is. Because if we pretend it's something cleaner than it is, we'll make decisions like it's something cleaner. And those are the decisions that get people caught or killed." She looked at Isaiah. "I need us to agree in this room that we know what we're doing." Isaiah looked at her. "We know what we're doing," he said. "Say it plainly. We're going to find the men who did this. We're going to find out where they are and what their routines are, and we're going to end them." He paused. "That's what we're doing. That's all it is." The room was quiet. Tobias spoke. "My wife's name was June," he said, not to anyone in particular. To the room, to the air. "My sons were Aaron and Daniel. Aaron was 9, Daniel was 6. He stopped. Something shifted. "Clara," said Isaiah. "My wife." "Joseph," said Elias. "My brother," his daughter Lily. "Samuel and May and their children," said Marcus, his voice flat and controlled. "5 of them." "Henry," said Ruth. "My husband. And Thomas, my youngest son." Cyrus said nothing for a moment. He looked at the floor. "Everyone," he said finally. "All of them." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. They sat with the names for a moment in the laundry room on Beale Street, these names that had no record, that would appear on no county file, that existed only in the 7 people carrying them. Then Isaiah said, "We start with the information, before anything else." They got to work. Isaiah assigned each person a role. Elias had a cousin named George in Shelby County, a careful man of 50, who had worked for Harold Cutter for 6 years, and who understood, when Elias came to him, exactly what was being asked. George knew Cutter the way workers knew employers from the only available angle. Present, but not considered. Hearing everything, seen as nothing. The Friday evening absences. The quality of Cutter's behavior on the days around them. The conversations that stopped when George entered a room. He gave all of it to Elias, without being asked twice. Marcus spent 3 months in DeSoto County retracing roads he had known before the war, moving through the county methodically and without hurry, filing each piece of updated information in the only safe place, which was inside him. Ruth returned to midwifery in the counties north and west of Memphis, where she was new and her skill preceded her history. She sat with women in labor for hours, sometimes days, and she listened to the way people talked in extremity, the unguarded way, when there wasn't enough energy left to keep what was true from coming through. She learned things in those rooms that the men on their list would not have believed could travel through the channels it traveled. Tobias got the hardest assignment: infiltration. Isaiah explained it to him alone, after the others had gone on the third Sunday. Some of the men we're looking for are on properties where we have no way in from the outside. The information doesn't exist anywhere we can reach without going inside. He looked at Tobias directly. So we go in. We take whatever hire is available. We work a season. We watch. We learn. We leave. How long? As long as it takes to know what we need to know. Not longer. Tobias was quiet for a moment. And when I come back? We decide together, all 7 of us, every single time. Nobody acts alone. Nobody acts fast. We move when we are certain, not comfortable, certain. The difference between those two things is the difference between doing this correctly and getting everyone killed. One more thing, said Isaiah. What? You come back whole. Whatever it costs you to be in there, and it will cost you, you come back from it. Because I need all 7 of us. Tobias looked at him. I'll come back, he said. He was the one Isaiah was most worried about keeping that promise. Tobias spent the winter of 1866 on the Lattimore property in DeSoto County as a hired field worker. He arrived in December with a letter of recommendation that Cyrus had obtained through a contact he didn't name. He was given a place in the workers' quarters and a daily wage that was less than the letter specified, and that he accepted without comment, because acceptance without comment was the required performance, and he was capable of it. He worked. He was genuinely good at field work, had been doing it his entire life. And performance built on actual competence was easier to sustain than performance built on nothing. The people around him saw a reliable, quiet man who gave them no reason to look closely. He gave them every reason not to. He learned the property methodically, one element at a time. Not quickly. Quickly would have been visible. With the patience of a man who understood that the value of information was not in the speed of its acquisition, but in its completeness. The patrol routes, the positions of buildings relative to roads, the creek crossing 2 miles east, shallow enough to move through fast, the bunkhouse where the white workers stored their rifles. He learned which of those workers attended the Friday evening gatherings at the Lattimore barn. He learned what those gatherings were. He learned the names and faces of the men who led them. On his 6th week, working the South Field on a Tuesday morning, he overheard 2 of the white workers talking during the midday break. They were talking about a man who had left Mississippi 2 years ago, not saying anything important from their perspective. Ordinary minor gossip about someone they knew peripherally, someone who had moved north and was doing well. They mentioned his name. They mentioned where he had gone. They mentioned, as an unremarkable detail, that he was running a general store in Shelby County now, that he had become respectable. Tobias recognized the name. He had heard it from Ruth, one of her 11, on the night of the fire on the road to Memphis. He did not change his expression. He did not stop working. He did not look up or alter his rhythm or do anything at all that would indicate, to anyone watching, that what had just been said had any meaning to him. Inside him, something cold and exact clicked into place. He continued working. He thought, I have to remember exactly what was said. He thought, I have to give this to Isaiah without changing a word. He thought, June, Aaron, Daniel. He worked through the afternoon. He ate what was given. He lay on his pallet that night in the dark of the workers' quarters and went over what he had heard, word by word, to make certain he had it all. He had it all. He came back from that winter thinner and quieter than he had left. He sat down across from Isaiah in the back room of the laundry and gave him everything. The patrol routes, the names, the barn, the rifles, the 2 men, and the conversation in the south field on a Tuesday morning in January. Isaiah sat with all of it for a long time. Then he said, "You did well." Tobias nodded. He stood. He picked up his coat. "Isaiah." "Yes." "Don't make me go back anywhere like that again unless there's no other way." Isaiah looked at him. "I won't," he said. He meant it. Cyrus mapped the roads. He had the specific gift of spatial memory. Walk a road once. Carry it permanently. Every turn, every landmark, every point of cover, and every point of exposure. He walked every road they would need, 3 times each, at different hours, in different weather. He gave Isaiah maps that existed only in spoken words because written maps could be found. Isaiah memorized every word. One evening, Cyrus asked him, after a long Sunday session, what Isaiah thought about when he wasn't thinking about the work. "My daughter," said Isaiah. Cyrus nodded. "I think about my mother," he said. "She died before the night that brought me here. Natural causes, just old age. But I think about the fact that she never got to see me do something that would have told her who I turned out to be." Isaiah was quiet for a moment. "She raised you," he said finally. "Yes." "Then she already knew." Cyrus looked at him. Then he nodded, picked up his coat, and went home. Isaiah sat alone in the empty laundry and listened to the city outside. Mercy was 8 years old in the spring of 1868. She was living with the Washingtons, a couple in their 40s, steady people who had taken her in at Isaiah's asking and who gave her the careful, consistent care that a child in her situation needed, and that Isaiah, doing what he was doing, could not provide alone. He visited every Sunday after the Brotherhood meetings, arriving at the Washington house in the early evening smelling of lye soap, looking like a man who had been sitting in a room talking for a long time. On a Sunday in April, she was on the front step when he arrived, working on something in her lap. "What are you doing?" "Writing," she said without looking up. "Mrs. Washington is teaching me." He sat down beside her. She showed him the paper. Her name, written in careful, deliberate letters, each one placed with enormous concentration, the whole word slightly uneven, but entirely legible. "Mercy." He looked at it. "That's your name," he said. "I know it's my name. I wrote it." He almost smiled. It was the first time in 2 years his face had done anything close to that. "Write it again," he said. She looked at him. "Why?" "Because I want to watch." She looked back at the paper. She put the pen down carefully, and then picked it up again with the deliberate attention of a child who takes things seriously. And she wrote it again. Slowly, each letter. "Mercy." He watched her write. He thought about Clara, about the Sunday morning's braiding hair, the focused quiet of it, about what Clara would have said about this moment, about this girl, 8 years old, writing her name on a front step in Memphis. He thought she would have said something exact and right that he wouldn't have thought to say himself. He thought she would have known what this was. He put his hand briefly on the top of Mercy's head. She did not look up. "Are you staying for supper?" she said. "For a little while," he said. He stayed for 2 hours. The planning took 4 months. Marcus built the tools, not weapons that announced themselves, but things that could be explained as something else. He made them with the precision of a craftsman who understood that the quality of the tool was part of the quality of the outcome. Ruth prepared what she prepared. She said it was reliable, that it left nothing a physician in 1867 would know to look for. She said this with the authority of 30 years of understanding what bodies could and couldn't survive. Cyrus walked the roads. Isaiah ran it all the way. Ruth ran a difficult labor, calmly, methodically, attending to each element in sequence without skipping ahead to the conclusion before the preceding steps were complete. He asked the same questions multiple times. He drilled the variables. He went over it until it was not a plan, but a reflex. He thought, in the Sundays between the planning and the outcomes, about the 4 faces. 3 accounted for. 1 remained. Warren Cole. Harold Cutter was the first. Elias and Marcus went. They arrived at a property near the Cutter operation on Thursday as short hire workers, worked through Friday, and on Friday evening were not where they were expected to be. Harold Cutter did not arrive at his gathering. He was found the next morning. The Shelby County Sheriff examined the scene, wrote his 2 sentences, closed the file. Isaiah heard about it the following Wednesday through George. He sat with it for a full day before he told the others. When he told them on Sunday, the room was quiet for a long time. Ruth spoke first. "I want to say what I said the first Sunday." "Say it," said Isaiah. "Cutter had a wife and children." She looked around the room. "That's not a reason to stop. It's a reason to remember that this is not clean. What we're doing costs something, and the cost doesn't land only on the person we're aiming at." "We know," said Tobias. "Then we keep going," said Ruth. "With our eyes open, every time. That's all I ask." Isaiah held her gaze. "Every time," he said. They kept going. They moved through 4 counties over 14 months. Not quickly. Speed was the enemy. They were not efficient. Efficiency was about speed. They were thorough. Thoroughness was about completion. The difference between those 2 things was the difference between doing this correctly and making the mistake that ended everything. Each action was preceded by the same preparation. Each preparation took between 2 and 4 months. Each target was studied until they were not comfortable but certain. Comfortable came faster. Certain took longer. Certain was the only acceptable standard. Tobias went into 1 more property. Just 1, as Isaiah had promised. He came back thinner and quieter and gave Isaiah everything he had found, and then sat in the laundry on a Sunday evening without speaking. Nobody asked him to. They let him be present without requiring contribution. When the others left, he stayed. Isaiah stayed too. "How do you keep going?" said Tobias. "Not the plan. Inside. How do you stay yourself?" Isaiah thought about it for a long time. "Mercy," he said. "I think about what she's going to need from me when this is over. What kind of father she deserves." He paused. "I can't become something she can't receive. So I don't." Tobias looked at him. "That's enough?" "It's what I have," said Isaiah. Tobias nodded slowly. He went home, and Isaiah sat alone and listened to the city. Cyrus came to Isaiah on a Thursday evening in October 1868, outside the regular meeting time, which he had never done before. He sat down and put a piece of paper on the table. "A letter from my cousin in Benton County," he said. "There's a name in it. A man who moved to Shelby County 2 years ago and is running a general store." Isaiah looked at the paper without touching it. Ruth's list. 3rd name. The one we couldn't locate. Isaiah picked up the letter. He read it. He set it down. "Are you certain?" "Not yet. Description matches. Timing matches." Cyrus looked at him. "I think we need to send Ruth." Isaiah nodded. "I'll ask her Sunday." Cyrus stood. He picked up his coat. Isaiah. Yes. This is the last one on your list. Yes. And after this? After this, there are other lists. Ruth has 8 remaining. Tobias has 6. Isaiah looked at him. We started with the ones we knew personally. We have enough now to find the ones we don't. Cyrus was quiet. He was 28 now. 2 years of Sunday evenings in this room. 2 years of walking roads at different hours in different weather, carrying maps inside himself that no search could find. 2 years of carrying what he had been carrying since Benton County, all of them, the fact of all of them, in the compressed way he had developed for large things. I'm in, he said. For as long as it takes. He went home. Ruth went to Shelby County on an October afternoon, a real midwifery call. A woman who had requested her specifically. On the road back to Memphis, she stopped at the general store and spent the time it took to purchase a length of cloth and a small quantity of salt, looking at the man behind the counter. She came back on a Thursday evening. She sat down across from Isaiah. It's him. You're certain? I memorized 11 Faces by Torchlight in 1866, said Ruth. The broken nose, the scar on the right hand from an old burn, the way he holds his mouth when he isn't speaking. She held his gaze. It's him. Isaiah called the Brotherhood on Sunday. He told them everything he knew about Warren Cole's routine, the store hours, the road home, the Friday evenings, the 12 miles he had been driving every Friday for 2 years without variation, because men who believe they are the consequences do not vary their routines. He told them what he proposed. He looked at Ruth. Eyes open, he said. Eyes open, she said. Around the room, one by one, they were all in. On the last Friday of November, 1868, Warren Cole drove south from the county seat at his usual hour. He was found the next morning. Isaiah heard about it on Wednesday through George. He sat alone that evening in the back room of the laundry. Ada had gone home. The smell of soap and wet cloth in the dark. The sounds of the city coming through the walls. Memphis in 1868, trying to become something new without yet knowing what that something was. He sat with what he was feeling. He was not what he had been in September 1866. The man who had run through the burning with his daughter and stopped at the tree line and turned. That man had been carrying something that did not yet have a shape. This man had given the thing a shape. He had built the shape out of 2 years of Sunday evenings in this room. The shape had done what he built it to do. It had not brought Clara back. He had never thought it would. He had been clear about the arithmetic from the beginning, because confusing what a thing can do with what you want it to do was the kind of error that made men reckless. And reckless men didn't get to finish what they started. It had not solved the problem. 7 people working in the margins of a broken world could not solve the problem. The men in white still met on Friday evenings, still rode roads in the certainty that the roads belonged to them. The Brotherhood had put a hole in the certainty, a small hole, the exact size of 7 people who had decided, carefully and patiently and with their eyes open, that they were not willing to let the world be only what it was. It was a small hole. But a hole was a hole. Isaiah picked up his lamp. He walked out of the laundry into the Memphis night. He walked north toward the house where Mercy was sleeping. He thought about her writing her name on the front step in April. The deliberate, concentrated movement of the pen. The way she hadn't looked up when he put his hand on her head. He thought about the singing. The formless, tuneless singing of a 6-year-old coming through the cabin wall on a September evening in 1866. Filling the air. Filling the ordinary evening without knowing it was filling it. without knowing it was the last ordinary evening, without knowing anything except that there was music inside her, and the music needed to come out. He had heard it. He had picked her up and run. He had not heard it since. He walked north through the city. He arrived at the house. He stood outside for a moment. From inside, very faintly, his daughter's voice talking in her sleep. Not words, just the sound. The soft, unguarded sound of a child whose sleep was deep enough that something came through. He stood in the dark outside the door and listened for a long moment. He thought, she is alive. He thought, she is here. He thought, Clara, you should hear this. He went inside. He sat in the chair by her bed and watched her sleep until the lamp burned low, and the room was dark except for the light coming through the window from the street. The ordinary functional light of a city going about its business. In that light, he could see the slow rise and fall of her breathing. The small, definite fact of it. The way it continued without requiring anything from her. He thought about what they had done and what remained to do. The distance was large. It had always been large. But they were walking it. One Sunday at a time, one road at a time, one name at a time. Tomorrow there was more work. There was always more work. He picked up his lamp and went to bed. There is no record of the Brotherhood. There is no record because the Brotherhood left none. Because they understood from the beginning that a record was a liability, that what could be written could be found, and that the only protection available to them was the same protection that had always been available to people in their position. The invisibility of people doing exactly what was expected of them, in plain sight, where no one thought to look. The county records of Shelby County, DeSoto County, Fayette County, and Marshall County contain, between 1867 and 1871, a combined total of 17 unexplained deaths. Men found on roads, men found in fields, men found in the places they traveled alone on evenings when they believed themselves unobserved. Causes of death listed variously as cardiac failure, unknown causes, misadventure. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was questioned. Nobody connected these deaths to each other or to anything. The record simply contains them. 17 entries, 2 sentences each, filed and closed and left in the particular dusty silence of things that nobody with authority over them has ever had any interest in explaining. What the record does not contain: a man named Isaiah who ran through a burning field with his daughter and arrived 2 years later at a shape for the thing he was carrying. A woman named Ruth who memorized 11 faces by torchlight and spent 2 years making sure each one was accounted for. A man named Elias whose hands could build anything, including the trust that a plan required. A man named Marcus who carried compression in his body like a stone carries heat. Silently, constantly, for as long as was necessary. A man named Tobias who spent months at a time being someone he wasn't in order to find out what needed to be known, and who came back whole every time because he had promised he would. A man named Cyrus who remembered every road he walked and never needed to write any of them down. A woman named Ada who owned a laundry on Beale Street and asked no questions about what happened in her back room on Sunday evenings. A girl named Mercy, 8 years old, writing her name on a front step in Memphis in April 1868. Not knowing what her father was doing and knowing at the same time, in the way children know things without knowing how they know them. That whatever he was doing it for her. None of them are in the record. Most of the important people never are. But they were there. They did the work. And somewhere in the 17 entries, in the flat, bureaucratic language of sheriffs who found what they found and wrote what they were willing to write and left everything else in the silence where it has lived for more than 150 years. The work is present. You can feel it if you know how to read it. Isaiah knew what he was doing and what it cost. He did it anyway. With his eyes open, all of them did it with their eyes open. And before they started, in a small room that smelled of soap on a Sunday evening in Memphis, they said the names out loud. Clara, June, Aaron, Daniel, Joseph, Lily, Samuel, May, Henry, Thomas, everyone, all of them. The names are in the record now. They always deserve to be.